Hi there, monetizers. Welcome to Conversations with Hetty. My name is Hetty The Entrepreneur, and I am South Africa's #1 monetization expert. So today's conversation that we're having is all about podcasting. I must say, in the recent history, this is probably one of the most asked questions. Hetty, should I hop onto the podcast trend? How do I start a podcast? Should I be doing a podcast, etc.? So let's unpack the conversation a little bit and really get into the nitty-gritties. This is definitely a video that you want to watch if you're thinking of starting a podcast. All right, so first and foremost, one of the things that I always tell everybody to think about is, what is your intention behind actually wanting to start a podcast? Podcasting is absolutely great, and we can all see that it's something that's trending at the moment. But why do you want to start a podcast? When somebody says to me, "Hey, podcasts are trending, therefore I want to start a podcast," that is an immediate red flag. And the reason why that's a red flag is because anything that you do in life, simply because it's a trend, is probably going to be short-lived. So yes, when you start out, it'll be amazing because it's a trending thing. But when something else comes along later down the line, you might lose the energy and the momentum to actually want to continue with your podcast. So the intention behind wanting to start a podcast needs to be something that is bigger than the fact that it's trending. All right. Some of the best podcasts that are out there are because the host of the podcast has a unique message that they are either passionate about or really, really love, that they want to be able to get out into the marketplace. So what is that thing for you? What is the intention behind your podcast? The other reason why your intention needs to be so much bigger than just the fact that it's trending is because of all of the digital products. Podcasting is probably one of the hardest to monetize. So it's one of those things where you might start in month 1, but it doesn't mean you're going to make money in month 2 or month 3. In fact, some of the best podcasters took several years before they started monetizing. So in order to keep that longevity going and being able to actually continue with your podcasting career, it needs to be something that is so much bigger than yourself. So what is your intention behind starting a podcast? A podcast can be an outlet. It can be a creative avenue and space for you to be able to express yourself. It can also be a way to add a little bit more meat onto the skeleton of your offering and give added value both to your audience, your community, and to your sponsors. A podcast can also be a funnel into your other products and services that you offer. So you want to be absolutely clear as to what your intention is behind wanting to start a podcast. That's point number 1. And make sure that you dig deep within yourself and have an honest conversation with yourself. Perhaps you're looking to start a podcast because you want to be famous or you want to be well known. There's so many other ways to achieve those same results without podcasting necessarily being the route. So have an honest conversation with yourself as to why you want to start a podcast. For some people, when they say they want to start a podcast, what they are actually trying to say is, "Hetty, I want to be successful." And I see the people that I know and admire having podcasts and being successful. Therefore, I believe that podcasting is my route or vehicle to success. Then we need to sit down and unpack, in actual fact, what does success mean and look like for you? And then what is the roadmap to get there? If podcasting is the way to get there, then fair enough. There's no problem. You can go ahead and do it. But let us absolutely interrogate and make sure that we have covered all our bases. The second thing that I want you to take into consideration when you are thinking of starting a podcast is the format of your podcast. truth be told, traditionally, podcasts were always in audio form. So you would get them on a platform like a Spotify or any other podcasting platform. But now podcasts have evolved and the video element has now come into play. So do you want to be on an audio-only platform? Do you want to be on audio plus visual? All of these things play a role in the way in which your podcast is actually then going to be received. As an avid consumer of podcasts myself, I consume podcasts. I am obsessed with podcasts. I love podcasts. There's some podcasts that I prefer to watch, and then there's some that I prefer to listen to. And depending on what it is that I get out of that particular podcast. So you really want to ask yourself, what is the best format possible for me to get my messaging across? This is absolutely important for you to really, really consider. The other thing when it comes to the format is also thinking about the structure of your actual podcast. A lot of times we follow the models that we are accustomed to. So your favorite podcaster interviews the who's who in the zoo, and as a result, you think, oh, that means if I want to start a podcast, I also need to have guests. Not necessarily. In fact, not at all. I listen to a huge, wide range of podcasts. Some of them have guests. Some of them, it's just the host that is speaking. Others, it is two co-hosts that are bantering together. Others, it's in the form of group conversations and discussions. Some of them, they're almost in a journal, diary, speaking to their audience type of podcast. So the ways in which you go about your podcast are varied. I would really encourage you to allow your brain to explore that thing that is going to make your podcast unique. I often find new people coming and popping up in the scene, and you can see that they're a replica of somebody else's podcast, which I find to be quite a pity because it robs the audience of their uniqueness and their authenticity. We want a taste of you and what makes you unique. So really think long and hard about the format. You don't always have to have guests on your platform. And if you do decide to have guests, be selective. What type of guests do you want to have on your podcast? Once again, it comes back down to the intention of your podcast. It's very, very easy to go the controversial guest route, the polarizing conversations and topics and themes, because we know that those are the ones that are going to bring eyeballs to your platform. But is that what your platform is about? And if it is, there's nothing wrong with that, but be clear about that and make peace with that. But if you know that your podcast is about personal development, or it is about life coaching, or it is about holistic wellness, you want to then make sure that the guests that you bring onto the podcast are in alignment with the intention of the podcast. And it's not always going to be your most sexiest guests, but when you are building a podcast, you need to have a long-term view in mind and begin with the end in mind. Have the caliber of individuals that you want to be associated with the brand that you are building through your podcast. The third thing that you really want to consider when building a podcast is your predictability model. Your predictability model. Now, what do I mean by this? Human beings love predictability, particularly when it comes to the media that they consume. Now, remember, I've mentioned this before. Our platforms are media houses where people would traditionally watch television based on a program that would say, all right, 8 o'clock, this show's playing, 9 o'clock, that show's playing, 10 o'clock, that show is playing. Now people watch based on the platforms that they enjoy and the creators that you enjoy. So you want to view your podcast like a channel, just like you would a television channel or a radio channel. And what makes channels interesting is predictability. So what are the days that you are going to publish your podcast? Is it every Monday? Is it every Wednesday? Is it once a week, twice a month? What is the predictability model? When you sit down and bed down a predictability model, it teaches your audience what to expect from you, the kind of content to expect from you, the kind of energy to expect from you, the frequency of content to expect from you as well. So your predictability model allows us to know how we engage with you. Is it once a week? Is it twice a week? Is it seasonal? So in other words, you've got season 2, season 3, season 4, or is it one of those that is consistently, continuously running? That is important for your audience to know. The other thing that you want to consider from a predictability model perspective is the setup of your podcast. Is it something similar to this, where you've got a desk and you're speaking directly into a camera? Are you going to be more conversational, couch style, where it's nice and comfortable? Are you going to have a guest sitting next to you or on the other side of the table? Is there a particular color scheme or backdrop that you are wanting to have, particularly if it is a visual podcast? I have listened to all kinds of podcasts. I've listened to couples lying on their pillow in bed and having conversations about building marriages and building of their relationships. I have listened to podcasts of people cooking in the kitchen and having kitchen table talk. I have listened to podcasts of people sitting around a table and digging deeper into the conversation. So what is the predictability model of your podcast? Once again, it does go back to the intention. How you set up the look and the feel and the structure of your podcast is going to go back to the intention. Do you want people to contemplate while listening to your podcast? Do you want them to sit down and think, that's interesting. I need to write that down. I need to ponder on this. I need to journal about this. Is yours the type of podcast that you want people to listen to while they're driving in the car? Is yours the type of podcast that you want people to listen to as a form of release, as a way to let their guard down, to experience some comic relief, to laugh a little bit and forget about the troubles and the worries of the world? You see, podcasts all serve different intentions. Of all the many podcasts I listen to each and every one of them for a different reason. So there are those that I listen to when I literally don't want to exercise my mind too much and I just want to let free. And there are others that I listen to when I want to be motivated, inspired, and uplifted. And there are those that I listen to when I really want to be contemplative. So the predictability model in terms of your setup and your frequency is also directly linked to the intention behind your podcast. The next thing, of course, consistency. I don't need to tell you about consistency. I have been preaching the gospel of consistency for time immemorial. The truth of the matter is that you need to be consistent when it comes to podcasting. You're not going to get the results that you want on day 1, and you might not even get them on day 100, but you absolutely want to be consistent. And one of the interesting things about podcasts is that even when people discover you 3 or 4 years down the line, once they catch on to your content and they fall in love with what you do, they always go back and listen to your back catalog. So there is absolutely no piece of content when it comes to podcasting that goes to waste. Something that you recorded 2 years ago can still be listened to today. So please, consistency is important. You lose the trust of your audience when you're constantly coming and saying, I'm back, guys, sorry, I had to take a break, but you're constantly taking a break. And then after coming back, you take another break. Bet on yourself and your audience by being consistent. The next thing that you want to look at is a marketing plan. Yep, a marketing plan is absolutely important. You see, when you treat your podcast like a hobby, you're going to get hobby results. But if you treat your podcast like a business, that's when you begin to get business results. What are you going to do to increase the amount of eyeballs, download, and engagement with your podcast? What are the different ways in which you are going to ensure that you are able to grow your podcast from a marketing perspective? So if I were you, I would literally sit down and map out my marketing plan for my podcast 12 months ahead of time. And the reason why I say that is because by the middle of the year or towards the end of the year, when you've lost steam or momentum, sometimes you run out of ideas and creativity. So sitting down when you are well energized to plan your marketing plan and ensure that you begin to get the cogs of the wheels going is going to really put you in good stead. Then the final thing that I really want you to think about before starting your podcast is what is going to be your monetization plan for your podcast. In the beginning, of course, we all understand that you're still building it up. You're building the credibility, you're building your audience, you're building your niche within your podcast. But at some point, you really want to sit down and plan out your monetization strategy as far as your podcast is concerned. How are you going to make money through your podcast so that it can begin to pay for itself? Now, there are, of course, some obvious revenue streams when it comes to your podcast. Some of those revenue streams come from AdSense, it comes from memberships, it comes from subscriptions, it comes from your super fans, etc. And others also come from sponsors, sponsoring an episode, as paying for an interview, sponsoring product placement, etc. But remember, there are so many ways you can actually monetize your podcast. Your podcast can be used as a funnel to other products and services as well. So make sure that you've really sat down and explored all of the different ways that you can generate revenue from your podcast. The revenue generating streams that come directly from yourself are far easier to put into place than revenue generating streams that come through the podcast platform that you are on. For example, if you know that you've got a visual podcast, then obviously being on YouTube means that there's certain criteria that you need to meet. For example, the number of subscribers and watch hours that you have. So really, you want to balance the different revenue streams and sources of revenue so that there aren't too many barriers to monetizing your podcast. Listen, this isn't a sexy video, okay? I wish I could tell you that, yes, go ahead, start a podcast. It's super easy. Everybody is doing it. You can start it haphazardly. That's perfectly fine. But if you want to build something that has got longevity, that is sustainable and is monetizable, then you absolutely want to apply your mind and treat it like the business that it actually is. Invest in it, invest in the equipment that you use so that you can ensure that you are literally putting your best foot forward. So should you start a podcast? Should you hop onto the bandwagon? Absolutely. You certainly should. But you should do it with your eyes wide open, with a plan and a strategy. Because when you've got a plan and a strategy, it's going to ensure that it keeps your momentum going. It's going to ensure that it keeps you energized to keep going, particularly when in front of you, there is no evidence that you should actually continue going. So, how have you found this conversation? Let me know within the comment section. Do you have a podcast? Are you thinking of starting a podcast? Are you a consumer of podcasts? Which are some of your favorite podcasts? And what platforms do you enjoy listening to your podcast? Do you prefer audio or do you prefer visual? Let me know all of the tea within the comment section, and let's continue the conversation over there. Thank you so much for tuning in to Conversations with Hetty, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye for now.